Just when you thought you could get a break for winter, it is almost time, if not time, to start your spring seedlings, and we're going to tell you how to start your seedlings for the first batch of 2022, right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening. We are your hosts, Ben in Batavia, and you can find me gardening in the country.
And you'll find me gardening in the city. Get ready as we dig deep into this
wonderful world of gardening, where we learn to grow and grow for change. Tell me you've started seeds, Batavia.
I've started seeds, Batavia.
Perfectly answered. Yeah, it's starting seeds. So this is going to kick off a series of starting seeds, and we're going to break it down into sections so it's easily digestible, because spring seeds and what we'll call summer seeds, I'm throwing up air quotes in case you can't see me, because you can't, but you know, they're completely different. And so there's different tactics and different things to think about. And this is going to kind of set us into what I'm hoping, and I'm going to speak for Batavia, hopefully what she hopes too will help you be more successful with starting seeds, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I'd say.
Okay. Your answers are interesting this year
new year,
so far.
New me,
so.
remember?
Still. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so starting spring seeds, what are we referring to when we say that? I'm
referring to primarily cool weather crops, which are the things I'm going to be growing in my garden in the spring. So for me, temperatures in the spring are generally above freezing, right? But it's not kind of all crazy. We're not like getting 80-degree weather. So it absolutely is still cooler weather for me in spring.
Right. And these seedlings will be able to withstand light freezes as well. And as we've said before, prefer them. So, and we're talking about your, we're not even going to go crazy with like brassicas and stuff like that, like lettuce, kale, you know, stuff like that, your greens, your broccolis, stuff like that. So, I honestly think, I know in my area, a lot of these are overlooked by some gardeners because, you know, they can be like in the South, they can be difficult to grow because what we think of when to put seeds in the ground and when they should actually be put in the ground are two totally different things. Mm-hmm.
And
so a lot of time.
Go
ahead.
A good reference to that is what's in my stores is limited. So some of my stores that I would normally shop in the summer don't even have like transplants. And again, we're talking about seedlings here, but I want to kind of draw the connection to what you're saying with, you know, folks really aren't ready to put things in the ground. I think cabbage, broccoli, collards, I think like that's all I saw in the stores last spring. Yeah. And that's a good indication too, though. Late winter, I'm thinking like March going into, I'm gonna call it March, right? You know, because April things get kind of hinky, and it's like that's a tomato plant. Come on, folks. But anyway, but there's much more. Well, let's start off like this. What are you starting for your spring garden? So all of the green things. Now, there is the distinction between what I'm starting indoors, which is what I want to focus on, what we're focusing on, versus those things I'm direct sowing. So I'm going to do broccoli. I've had 1 year of success with broccoli, and I've really been thinking about the things that will preserve, like things I can throw in the freezer, things that I enjoy. I want to add to multiple meals during the week. And so I'm going to get bullish and say I'm going to double, if not triple up on broccoli. So broccoli, I'm going to do some cabbage, starting them indoors. Of course, I'm going to try collards again this year. Kale. So a lot of leafy greens, definitely doing lettuce. Because it worked last year, I'm actually going to start in a container that will ultimately, the whole container will go outside. I'm going to start carrots indoors as well. So again, I'm not transplanting the carrots. I'm going to sow the seeds indoors in the container they will ultimately live in, and take the whole container out when it's time to kind of air quote transplant.
So that's your full list?
I mean, I guess it's off the top of my head. Come on. New year, new me isn't any more organized than all year long me.
So here's my exact list of what I'm starting inside. Collards, lettuce, kale, cauliflower, broccoli, chard, cabbage of multiple types, kohlrabi, and then maybe turnips. Maybe. I'm not totally sure on that. And I'm actually going to give spinach a go at indoors as well. So that's a pretty comprehensive list. And what that does is that covers all of the different families for all the stuff. So, you know what I mean?
I'm going to see that list and I'll add to mine chard. I think that's the only thing that you said that I planned on or maybe hadn't thought of starting inside that I think it's a good idea. My chard was pretty slow to take off in the spring last year. I tried spinach last year, and I think it's just one of those things that, you know, this is where I balance how much space and time I want to spend doing indoors versus how many things I want to direct sow. And almost everything you named, question mark around turnips, which I know you have a question mark, maybe not for the same reason. Like, I feel like it'd be successful starting indoors and going out. But I want to minimize the amount of work I have to do with the whole nurturing them and transplanting them versus just letting nature do its thing once I direct sow. That's my story today. So
we'll stick to it.
I didn't say that.
I mean, damn.
I just said it's my story.
So, I mean, and so what that does is that kind of sets us up for me in my garden, that's my first batch of seedlings. And then after a certain amount of time, then we'll move on to your other stuff like tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they're completely different beasts when it comes to starting seeds. And I know Batavia and I we were talking, I believe it was yesterday. And she was like, well, I have a couple questions about, you know, this, that, and the other. And it made sense to kind of break this one subject apart into multiple ones, because a lot of times, like, my problem is I've been doing it so long that I take for granted what, you know, some people may or may not know, or some questions that people have. So it's good that we're both on different spectrums. And I mean, your seed starting capabilities are coming along amazing, except for kale, but we won't talk about that right now.
And to be quite frank, I mean, any of the brassicas, but anyway.
Which is a big part of what we're doing right now. So, and it all starts with you've got to have a good foundation in order to start your seeds. So that means you need to have a good soil mix to do it. And that means it needs to hold moisture. It needs to be fine, stuff like that, because you have to imagine this is going to go across the board for everything that we talk about for the next, period of time. But those roots, when they come out of that seed, are so fine that you don't want them to impede and have to find their way through all of the junk and stuff like that comes into these pre-bag mixes that we buy. So you can buy a mix, you can make a mix, whatever it is, just make sure that you sift through it a little bit and get those big chunks like bark and stuff like that out of there. And then that'll give you a good base to start off with. And then when we get to the recipe of the day, maybe I'll give you my soil recipe again, but it'll give you a good way to kind of get it going. So what do we do?
And so just a note, so we're going into year 3 for me, just, for those that are new here that haven't listened to every single episode. I guess you could be old here and still not listen to every single episode. So anyway, I started sowing seeds indoors in 2020. So I had 2020's year, and I did try to sow, although I didn't have a real spring garden then. I still tried to sow a lot of these vegetables indoors. And then I did seed sowing in 2022. And what's been consistent has been the trouble that I've had with kind of plants in the brassica family. And it's not very logical to me, right? So no real trouble at all with my summer seedlings. Your lettuces and things, they've been fine. I've had better luck starting carrots again indoors than I did outside. But I still haven't cracked the nut. I have had some successes, but very few. So we've tried a couple of things, different things, you and I, when it comes to, you know, troubleshooting what's happening with mine. And we'll probably continue that throughout this year. But I'm still going to go with what I believe to work when it comes to how I'm starting. For me, it is, you know, I'm actually, because I have a few bags left, and these are the first seedlings that I'm sowing. I'm starting with a bag mix. Because it worked for me generally in 2020, I added some boiled water to that bag mix. And you confirmed that should help with fungus gnats, which I'd prefer not to have if I can help it. So I'm going to pause there because I think your starting point is different than mine.
For starting seeds?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my starting point is getting organized.
Oh, you're going all the way back there. Okay.
Well, and I mean, it doesn't need to be a long, drawn out discussion about it. But for me, my problem in the past was I'd be like, okay, I'm going to start seeds today. And then I'd go out there and I would be like, okay, well, now I need to go get this and go get that. And it became, you know, a 20-minute job became an hour and a half job. And it just got really off-putting. So, yeah, that was my biggest thing, was just, you know, if I'm going to start seeds, I come up with a plan of how much I'm starting, how much I'm planting, how much I want to grow. And then I can go through there. You know, I get 6-pack cells. You can use peat dealies, the peat pellets, excuse me. You can put them in pots. I used to use yogurt containers back in the day. I did all kinds of stuff. So, you know, there's all these different options. It depends on your space requirements. And if you go back to last week's episode, we kind of talk about that with grow lights. Was that last week?
It was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we kind of talk about space and stuff like that. And then, you know, we go into soils. Now, I have fungus gnats every year. So I don't really worry about them too much. I just try to manage them. Does that make sense?
It does. And if we're going to go back, I guess, if we're going to go back to the beginning, you know, on day one. So you're looking at the calendar. I am, to say, when do I expect these to go outside? And so I'm working my way backwards from that to determine my calendar or my schedule for starting seeds. Because all of the things I listed in this is what, you know, I'm starting for spring, they won't necessarily be started at the same time.
No, and the other thing to realize too is, you know, my last frost date is April 15th, and I get these out into the ground around February 15th, mm-hmm. or I start hardening them off in February 15th. So you see how much far forward I am of my last frost date.
Yeah.
And that's really important to remember because, you know, in the past, I've made the big mistake of, hey, I want to grow broccoli. I'm going to put it out on April 15th after the last frost date, and then it's just bolting by the time it goes to head up.
Yeah.
So by getting them out earlier, you can get those heads formed and they're not like loose or starting to bolt or anything like that.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? Because
that is the hope.
Still a question mark, and I don't want to fast forward too much. There's still a question mark around how cold is too cold to, you know, what are these temperatures that are actually going to promote growth versus a plant is just staying alive? And that's the part that I'm still struggling to figure out.
Yeah, and luckily, like my state on the extension service, I have a guidance about that, and I take that guidance and then I add a week or two mm-hmm. on, you know, so it says I can put it says I can plant some stuff February 1st. So February 15th is my hardening off date. Mm-hmm. And so if I put it in then it's starting to grow. It gets comfortable February 15th. You know, by a week or two after that, it's comfortable. It's now setting its roots. You know, we've managed some cold. We're starting to warm up. So by the time it's April 15th, in theory, we've had about 6 weeks of actual growth occurring. Whereas if you just look at it as like, hey, this is my last frost date, it's time to plant, you're already behind the curve. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's kind of where, you know, that's the thought process behind it. And that's what makes these plants so much different than our summer plants. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's go to our break. And then when we come back, we're going to break down starting seeds, and I'll go over my process, and I'm sure Batavia's process is probably different too. And then we'll kind of, unhash whatever unfolds throughout the episode. So we'll be right back after this break. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck. Okay, so now that we have decided that, and hopefully you agree with us, that you need to plant these plants out earlier, where are we going to, let's start with the actual process. So, Batavia, what do you use for a seed mix, and how do you get it, get things planted in it?
So I am going to be doing 3 different things this year.
I knew you would be doing something like that.
So I am going to finish off the 2 or 3 bags I have of your regular seed mixture, like that you purchase. Those bags are like almost $5. So I have them. I don't plan on purchasing more. It's very light and fluffy, not a lot of nutrients in it. It's designed so I can ultimately pot up and, kind of feed those plants, yada, yada, yada. So that's one. Second thing is, once I've run out of that, I am going to, and this may not be in exact order, I brought in a bunch of bags of potting mix, regular potting mix, and you and I have talked about this on the show because I have had some success with that. So I'm going to be using that. And then if I can get into my garage, the third option is going to be my dear friend Ben's seed starting mixture.
You're going to love it. Once you do it, you'll never go back.
I still haven't figured out where I'm mixing it, where I'm storing it, because I really do, in my mind, want to create a big batch. It's not required, but that's how my mind works. Yeah,
I created a big batch, and it's all about just getting the right container. So I've done exactly what you've done before. Last year, I tested out for the final time using a potting mix, and it was horrible. I had really bad germination. It just didn't work out for me. I would have to sift out way too much. I wasn't pleased with it. I know there's people that use it, and I could have just bought the wrong potting mix. I'm sure I did. But there was too many chunks of stuff in there, and I just lost it. But the big problem I've had in the past with starting seeds is when I put the seed in, I'll go back and I'll water. And what that ends up doing is it buries the seed deeper. So that's a big problem I've had and then I'll go through and I'll be like, oh, well, such and such isn't germinating. And I'll start digging around. Like I use one of my number one tools I use for starting seeds is a chopstick. And I'll take a chopstick and I'll start digging around, and I'll see that, for instance, like my broccoli seed has sprouted, but it's now a half inch under the dirt and it's never going to make it. So what I've started doing is and a lot of these seed mixes are all the same. They hold water great, but you have to get them to take water first before you add the seed. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So what I do is I have a little bucket and I fill up my seed mix, whatever I'm using, and then I put water in it and let it absorb it. And then I put that in the pot. So now it's already wet, right? And so I'll make all of my pots. And then I take and I put all of my seed starting mix in that's already wet, and I get it all nice and even and flat. And then I water it again, overhead water, before I put a seed in it. And then I can just add my seed to it.
And my process is different. It does make sense. So I basically bottom water almost exclusively when starting.
This is the first time. This is the very first time before there's even a seed in. So you do bottom water then?
Oh, no. So if you go back to number 1, my seed mixture is already damp, right? So I'll put kind of that damp soil or mixture into my seed starting blocks. as you described, smooth it out, right? And then I'm placing the seed into it. No water will touch the top of the soil from my hand, right? So I put that seed in. Depending on how small or big, I may be, poking a hole in and putting it in. All in all, there's soil that's covering the seed. And then I take those containers and I put it into like a larger, I call everything plastic, kind of Tupperware container that has water in it. And I let it sit and I go on to my next task, and so I'll come back and I'll see that soil is completely damp. What damp soil, completely almost soaked. I'm stopping short of saying soaked soil. And
mine is usually soggy and I have to let it drain.
Yeah.
And last year when I started my peppers, I noticed I had bad problems with overwatering and they were just all getting buried too deep. I had really bad germination rates and I believe that was the problem. So this is, I stopped short of saying this statement, but I think that I've come to my final method of starting seeds now. Like I finally, after 7 years of starting seeds, like I get it, I'm starting to understand it. And what, you want to put the seed about twice as deep as the diameter of the seed. So if you look at a broccoli seed, that's not very deep. Same with a lettuce seed. A lettuce seed is, you barely scratch the surface and put that under.
Yeah.
So that's very important too. And you don't have to get out your calipers and measure, but you need to be very aware of that.
But to that point, and I'm just going to speak on this generally, and I kind of hinted at it. There's some of them that I'll use a Sharpie as my hole poker, right? So I'm actually making a hole in that seed block to put the seed in. And in some cases, I'm just collapsing the soil around it to, kind of bury the seed. In other cases, I'm putting some additional soil on top of it. But when we get to those smaller, finer seeds, that's a little bit different. And I kind of play that by ear, right? So it may be a more kind of broadcasting, which actually brings me to a question for you, broadcasting of the seeds and just seeing what germinates. So, I've been my question is coming up. I've been stingy with seeds, which, it has not worked out well for me. And I'm not even going to commit to me not being stingy anymore. So some of these seeds, if I have a bunch, I'll do multiple seeds in one sale. Others, I'll do single seeds, right? And obviously the multiple for me in most cases is to see if both germinate and then which is the healthiest. But I almost always end up, if both germinating, I end up, separating them and, moving the second seedling to something else, to another pot, which is a pain in the ass, but it's hard for me just to toss the seedling. So is it a single seed per cell block or do you do?
So yeah, usually what I do is if the seed's really fresh, like I just bought them or something, or I just harvested them and I've done my germination test and I know that like I'm fairly confident that they're going to germinate, then what I'll do is I'll put in, I'd say probably 2 seeds. And then if they're like older seeds, I'll put in 3, maybe 4. And that just ensures that. So, and to kind of jump ahead a little bit, well, no, we're just going to leave that right there. We're going to put a pin in the rest of that statement that you made.
I have something to add, but are we putting a pin in it? Are you?
Yeah, we're going to put a pin in it. We're going to go in order. So we're not going to jump everywhere. But, so once we do that and we get our seeds in and they're covered, I tamp my finger down lightly to you want good contact with the soil, right? You don't want to, really get down and start beating on it, but you just give it a little pat, and then that'll give it that good contact because that seed has to get wet and stay wet in order for it to essentially break through and the first roots come out. So this is a very non-scientific way to explain this as well, just so you know. So what I do, and explain to me how you do it, is I take it and then I will cover my trays and then I put them up. And you can use bottom heat or you cannot use bottom heat. That I'm mixed on that one. I use it because I have it available. It's cheap enough. It's not it didn't cost a fortune, so it's not a big deal. And I feel like I keep my house cooler So I feel like it helps, but I also have stuff germinate without it. So I don't really know, I'm not worried about shaving off 2 days of growing. Like, it doesn't make a big difference.
Yeah. So I don't do any kind of heat mats or anything like that. My motto is like, try to go the most simple method first. And then, make adjustments, kind of amp up if you need to. And when you said cover, and I don't know if that's like cover with something to create darkness, or is that like, I don't do that. I cover with like a plastic top if I have one plastic for the, the tray that I'm starting those seeds in.
Yeah. So can I make a suggestion to you and everybody else listening to this?
Of course.
If you're going to be serious about starting seeds, do yourself a solid favor and make the investment. And if you go to the Amazon list below in our shop, I should, and if I don't, it will be there by the time this airs. I'll have all the supplies there. You can get 10 by 20 trays, black trays they're usually meant for microgreens and stuff. Ugh. But you put those in there, and then you can put 6-pack cells in there. And then you can either if you really want to, you can use like saran wrap to cover it. Or you can take it another step further, which is what I've done this year. And I actually purchased the same amount of plastic tops to put on there in order to keep it. Because what that does, this is something I didn't do because I took the stance of you for a long time where, sorry, Shari Dog is pissed right now. Where I took and I put, I wanted to go easy. And so I went easy and I didn't cover them. And what I found out was before things would really germinate, the soil would dry up.
Yeah.
So what's happened now is because I have all of these tops on there and everything's moist, not only do I get better germination, but if I have a seed that I don't cover up and it's just laying on top, it germinates as well. And then I can just like take my chopstick again and cover it up with a little bit of soil. So it kind of, I've seen the benefits of having that. So I think it's like $15 for a set of 10 plastic tops that go over the 10 by 20 trays, and it works out great. And the 10 by 20 trays work out good because then they don't spill out. They're all uniform, so they fit on the shelves good and everything like that. Because that kind of stuff really impedes the process. Is when you're like, oh, well, you have a whole erector set going on. For me, it doesn't work because I'm like, I can't juggle all this stuff.
Yeah. So again, I use the covers that you're recommending. I guess thanks for the recommendation for the thing I'm doing.
Well, there's other people than just you listening.
Well, it sounds like you said can I make a recommendation for you and others? But okay.
Yeah.
And it's for all of those reasons. I've found that, that cover isn't going to stay on that, seed tray for the life of it, right? Obviously, There's only so much room between, the top. And I have seen a lot of people use saran wrap. Because I have been able to buy them for a really, really reasonable price. The black, basically in most cases, the black seed tray and the plastic cover, the clear plastic cover, I've gone with that. And that does speak kind of against what some of my motto is, like do it the easiest, the simplest way. But I kind of stumbled into that and it seems to work well. I absolutely have on occasion. So like in year one, I probably had some of those seedlings start that were kind of naked. And it's exactly what you described. It's kind of like everything looks good. And then it's another 36 hours before you get back down to your seeds. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. That did get dry really quickly because you just have to think about how little soil is in the seed starting. What do you call the things? The seed cell. The seed cell compared to if you were starting something and, direct sowing it. It's a lot more soil in anything that you're going to be starting a seed in, outdoors compared to how much seed starting mix you have that thing's trying to grow in. So that means less soil, quicker to dry out.
Now, I take my top off as soon as the majority of the seeds in that tray pop up. I take the top off. Because another thing that I've found is it will start to grow mold on top of the soil. And I've never done anything like cleaning it off or anything. I just take the top off and then it'll dry out and then it'll happen. But what happens when I use the bottom heat? So one thing I've noticed, because this is only my second year using bottom heat, and I am sold on it on this aspect, is with that top on there, you can see that it creates humidity inside. Mm-hmm. And so that just gives it a much more happy environment for these seeds to kind of get a kickstart. But as soon as the majority of them come up, I pull that off because I don't want any light to be impeded. I want them to get all of the light possible. Mm-hmm. From my seeds.
So mold and moss as well. And that kind of like, it's icky, and, you start to question, is the seedling healthy? And I think I think about the same time, it's when it comes to when I pull the tops off. One other thing you noted though, and I can't say for certain this really has a positive impact, but my house does run warmer than yours.
Yeah, and I think that's why I know yours does, and I think that's why the bottom heat's not as important for you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because your seeds, you start in a room next to your furnace, right?
Well, I have for the last 2 years, but this year I'm likely going to get further away from the furnace, but the basement still is warmer than probably most.
Yeah. So, and I mean, yeah, and exactly. So like my house is, I keep it quite cool. It's in the mid 60s usually. So, that's not really the best environment, but the bottom heat doesn't even stay on the whole time either. Once they get kicking and they start growing, so it's a multi-step process. Mm-hmm. Seed comes up, most of the seeds come up, let's say 60-70% of the seeds come up, top comes off. And then once they really get growing and they're starting to really show true leaves, or if I need that seed mat for something else too, mm-hmm, that's another thing. So I will pull it, but I'll leave that heat mat on there for as long as I can. But as soon as it gets those real leaves, it's done. Mm-hmm. I pull it out, it's over. So because I don't want that seed to be too comfortable, because remember, these seeds are going to go outside.
As my mom would say, your playhouse is coming down. I know y'all been all warm and cozy, but this ain't forever.
Yeah.
One thing to note, though, when we talked about you use 2 or 3 in some cases, sometimes I use 2. The thing about this, and we're going to talk about this over the course of this series that we're doing. So let's say, just a nice round number, I'm on day 10, right? So there's some things that germinated in day 2. There's some things that germinated 3 or 4 or 5 days later, and there's some things that may get to closer to that 10-day mark. If I'm waiting for that single seed to germinate that's in that seed block, I may run into day 10 and find myself with there's, a damaged seedling, or it didn't germinate at all. And guess what? I'm 10 days behind now.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to do, if that's okay.
Yeah, and that's why I start extras. So if I'm going to put, this year, I think I'm planning on putting 18 broccolis out in my garden. Mm-hmm. I'll start 24 broccolis. Mm-hmm. So I have extras. And then, when it comes time, we'll give it away if we need to. But I want to go back. And so, wait, hold on. And then that works twofold. So let's say we have 1 6-pack in that group that, or a couple 6-pack that one don't even grow at all or one dies. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world, because the way I look at it is, okay, that's just going to leave me more room in my garden because I'm probably going to overcrowd anyways.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at that as just like, it kind of helps me out. Now I want to go back to where you were like, you put multiple seeds in, and then when multiples come up, you take them and you split them. I never split them, ever. I cut them, and like when they're growing, I go back, I have a little pair of snips, and I'll just snip all of the ones around. I'll pick the strongest one. And if sometimes like I'll slip, and maybe let's say I'll put 6 in there, I'll go through and I'll start clipping them every couple days until I get to the strongest one. Because, and this is my theory, and I've read this a lot, but this is just kind of my experience. I don't take that seedling out and split it because I don't want to disturb the roots, because I've done that a number of times, and I pull it, I'm like, oh, well, damn, I ripped a root. It's got 2 roots and I ripped one of them off. So now you're 50% down the amount of nutrients it can uptake. So I never, ever split.
Yeah. So my gut tells me that the most efficient way, and maybe even the healthiest way, is to snip them.
Yeah.
But I can't bring myself, because I look at that as a plant. I look at that as food. It's not logical, right? I'm not saying that I always am. I brought this container in, of like a whole container of seed pods. And because they're completely dry, if I bump into something, the seeds are just kind of dropping to the ground. Itty bitty seeds. It's like a kale plant. And I had my broom and I was sweeping up, and I'm like picking through what I'm sweeping up to get the seeds. Like, it's a little bit unreasonable, right? Because there are thousands of seeds on that plant. So it's that same theory. Like, once I see it, a part of this probably is the newness of it. Like, there's life here. I've given life to this plant. But it's more work than it's probably worth. Right. You know, so if someone forced me to make a recommendation, I'd recommend going Ben's route. Right. But I'm transparent here. It's very hard for me to bring myself to cutting versus, you know, the separation. Again, even knowing that I could be harming the roots of the plant, even knowing that I'm increasing the number of plants. So I'm basically going to end up with more plants than I really wanted. But again, I didn't say that, you know, things that I do really make sense.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing, and this has been my stance from day one, is and I mean, I'm not really, well, I am saying it to you, but you have to get a level of harshness when it comes to that stuff, because in my theory is what that does is it's kind of jacked up, because I'm with you. I'm like, look, I planted that seed. I paid for that seed. Mm-hmm. I don't want to waste that seed. But then on the other, if I take it and I split that seedling, and I mean, we're talking about little tiny seedlings, yep. Mm-hmm. And if we split that, then I risk one, either hurting my harvest, setting me back, stressing the plant out, or just not having anything at all. If I damage it, there's way more risk than there is reward for me. Mm-hmm. And I've done that before. And the problem that I had is when I started out with, you know, 6 kale plants and I ended up with 30 kale plants. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with 30 kale plants? You know, so then I go through all of this to grow them, and then I throw them out, or they all shrivel up and die. Mm-hmm. So my method is, and this is, I will never change the way I do it, because it makes it a lot easier on me, because big reason is I don't have time to go through and separate shit like that. And so it just makes sense for me to just be done. And what that did, though, is that triggered me to starting fewer and fewer seeds in each hole. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, I still want to have a buffer so that I have them, but instead of clipping, 10 seedlings, now I'm clipping 1, maybe 2. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Yep. Now, lettuce is different. So my lettuce, I'll put multiple seeds in and I'll let that grow. And then I'll separate that when it comes time to plant out. But I don't want to put 10 in there. I might have 10 seeds in there because they slip out of my hands. I got big hands. Mm-hmm. But then I'll, as I'm clipping, I'm like, okay, there's 3 left. I'll leave them in there, because how many times have you gone to the store and bought a starter pack, and then out of those 6 plants, you have 12, mm-hmm. Or 15 or something. So that's a different one. But generally, for broccolis and stuff, like, you can't have 2 broccolis in the same seed cell. They will fight each other, mm-hmm. and they will dwarf. One will be dwarfed and one will be, mm-hmm. Take over. So makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is like
you need to be more harsh.
Every conversation we've had, privately, like, we're going to spend another 10 minutes arguing the thing that we both agree on. I agree with you. I'm just telling you what I do, and I acknowledge that it doesn't make sense, and I acknowledge that I may not get to the place that probably is the best place.
So basically what's going to happen, everybody, is we're going to get off here, and then we're going to have a conversation and be like, for 10, 15 minutes, I'm not going to do it.
I'm a flawed human being. Love me still.
We all are. There was only one that was perfect, and we're not him. So
here.
But that's super important. And so the difference that I see one of the major differences between summer and spring is goes kind of along with separating, is I don't pot up any of these plants. I never pot them up. So my theory is if I have to pot up, I started too early. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm still getting my feel for that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, like go to the store and go buy a 6-pack of broccolis and see how big they are. You know what I mean? They get pretty damn big in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I mean, it's different than like a tomato or something like that, where they really do need to be potted up to get a stronger and stronger plant out there. So I never pot up any of these plants at all. I'm trying to think of anything. You know, actually, I take that back. The only thing that I would pot up, and I wouldn't even start this now, I'd be starting it for fall. It is a cool weather crop, so you could, if you were in an area, is Brussels sprouts. Those I may pot up just so I have them bigger and stronger for the season. But other than that, I can't think of anything this time of year that I've stated I would pot up. Now, when it goes to timing and when to start certain seeds, I start in an order. I have a very specific order I go in.
Okay.
Would you like to know my order? It's kind of crazy, but...
is it something that you'd recommend others follow?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if I do it, I reckon.
Go for it.
I mean, so I start with like cabbages, broccolis, and then I'll wait like a week and I'll do cauliflower, kale, and then I'll wait another week and then I'll do lettuces, chard, stuff like that. And what that does is that gives me a taper. So the ones I start first are the ones that can take the coldest amount of weather and take the longest to grow, you know. So lettuce, for instance, it's the shortest one. No, I take that back. And then a month before they go, I put anything out. Then I'll put in my turnips and my kohlrabi because I do not want them to get root bound at all. I want them to be really young. And so what that does is, like with the lettuce, like you can eat lettuce at any time in its growth stage. You know what I mean? Same with kale, really. It's not, you can cut and come again, which I'm going to move away from this year, which I'm kind of worried about because I've never done that, but I think it's going to work out okay. But it's just kind of my method of doing it. And what it does is it keeps me in this time of year, the darkest days of winter, it keeps me in the dirt longer for a more prolonged period of time, with giving me a break too, because I'm not starting seeds for 8 hours straight. I'm doing a little bit and then a little bit and then a little bit.
Yeah. So, actually it's the reverse. I started my lettuces, much earlier, right? I had lettuce start in January, and I'm not sure why I did that last year, but I know I did it last year. I did it last year because I wanted to actually completely grow it and harvested it indoors. And I put out, like, if a lettuce was going to form a head, I put it out where it was a full, like beyond even baby leaf status. Like when I took the container out or when I took the seedlings out, like it was definitely edible because I did some mixtures. I did, the seed starting sales, but I did again have these small, narrow kind of window seal containers. And so for those, again, I may have even transplanted some of them into it. But anyway, there's a picture on my Instagram where I'm like taking this container out, and I could have harvested all that lettuce before I took it outside, but it did obviously grow a bit more, right? The lettuce was a bit fuller over time once it went outside. And so I did the same thing for 2022 because I'm a big fan of it. And there isn't, how should I say it? Like for a lot of these vegetables, we're talking about broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage, like it's a one-shot deal. I know that they're offshoots of broccoli and all, but you kind of have that one shot at it versus and kohlrabi as well versus not turnips, depending on if you're harvesting them for the roots. So you got that one shot, right? And for me, I want those plants to be a little bit bigger going out because they have some weather to still fight. So I planted, although a lot of these we're talking about now were purchased transplants in 2021. So all of those brassicas we're talking about, they went out the first week of April. Right. And in hindsight, I probably could have put them out a couple of weeks earlier. And that's maybe my plan this year. Not so sure. But basically, whatever goes in, however many broccoli plants I put out is the maximum number of broccoli, the broccoli heads that I'm going to harvest. Right. So in my mind, that's a little bit different than lettuce for whatever reason. Again, we're at the point in this life where you turn your head to the side and you wonder, what's going on with her? And I don't know either, but some of it's working for me. So I'm going to continue with it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I agree with what you started off with is, when you put a broccoli plant out there, you know what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. You're going to get one head of broccoli. Mm-hmm. Versus lettuce, you can be harvesting lettuce for months off of that one plant.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have multiple plants to kind of share the weight, but and then it's the same thing. So like within 1 square foot, if you go by Mel Bartholomew's book, Square Foot Gardening, that young Batavia got me for Christmas, you can put 4 heads of lettuce in there. So not 4 heads of lettuce, but 4
seedlings.
Leaf lettuces in there. So you can pack in more. So there's a whole lot of different. So when I give you my list and I'm like, this is what I'm starting. Like for instance, I started 36 lettuce plants. Okay, well, like, damn, that's a lot. Well, that's only 9 square feet of lettuce plants.
Yeah.
If you go by that method. So it's really not that much. Now, broccoli is a different story. Each broccoli takes up a square foot. I argue that it takes up more, but that's okay. But it's, it's, again, what you put out there is what you get. Yeah. So there's some crops that are going to give you a lot more than some other crops. So there's that.
Which I'm okay with. I'm okay with. Yeah. That's actually the spacing piece is actually what's made. And I didn't list cauliflower, and I didn't even come back with my rebuttal to, once you gave your list. I didn't even come back with cauliflower because I'm still on the fence with it. I'm also managing against like the space. And for me, cauliflower and broccoli take up about the same space, and I prefer broccoli over cauliflower. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But lettuce is a little bit different. Like you can, I would absolutely say it, and I should, but you can nip and tuck lettuce, all day long.
Yeah. And see, that's something though, for me, that I've learned that I don't think I can do here. I think that I have to grow it, cut it, and just keep it constantly going like that. So, but you're right. If you can do a cut and come again, you can do that all day long. And so it's when you go to lay out your seedlings for the year and what you're planning right now, you need to just take that into account. So really, as I'm speaking about this and we're talking Batavia, I've realized something. Gardening is really hard. Like it can be very difficult sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot more thought that goes into it than I think I assumed there would be going back many years. I'm trying to transport myself back to like 2008, 2009. And like, I never believed we'd be able to talk every week for an hour about gardening, not to mention all the time we talk about it offline. There definitely is a lot more coordination and consideration to give. Once you move past, a tomato plant and a pepper plant, Yeah,
I mean, you can make it as easy or as hard as you want. And I definitely recognize that, like, I may have in my life overcomplicated it, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, all of the things, if I said, it's maybe not logical, it definitely is a layer of complication that probably isn't needed. But again, I'm drawn to some of these things, right?
Yeah.
And a part of it also is I'm giving myself some grace around, like, I'm learning, right? I'm learning what my method's going to be. I'm learning what I feel like works for me, what feels good for me, and that's okay.
We forgot to talk about fertilizing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did. You know why?
Yeah. Because you. So look, let's do this. We're gonna go to the recipe of the day real quick, and then let's come back and we'll touch up on fertilizing. And this is, to me, this is where Batavia and I are different. This is a very important part of me, and I've seen great success from doing it. So sit tight. We're gonna go to this break and do the recipe of the day, and we'll come back. So it's time for the recipe of the day. If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners. All right, we're going to get in and out. Are we doing the seed starting mix as the recipe of the day or no?
I'll do that afterwards.
Okay. All right. So real quick, we still have some sweet potatoes from our sweet potato harvest. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We're going to do a sweet and spicy roasted sweet potato. So take a either date night size sweet potato. Check out Young Ben and the Backyard Gardens TV YouTube for that reference. So a sizable sweet potato or something a little bit smaller is fine. You're going to wash it up, clean it up good, cut it in half. You're going to score the sweet potato, right? We're getting this ready to go into the oven. Preheat your oven to about 425 degrees. You're going to score the sweet potato because you want some of the goodness we're going to talk about in just a second to get inside of it. So take a bit of oil. If you're conscious about this, make the adjustment, but take a bit of oil and you're going to rub that oil, olive oil as an example. You can do avocado oil if you want, all over both the skin and the actual flesh of the potato. You're going to bake this, uncovered for about 35 minutes. You want to let it get tender, right? So once it's to the point of tender, like you would eat a regular baked potato, you're going to take it out. I, as a preference, like to, because we're going to drizzle some honey on this, I like to put some honey into a small dish and put it in the microwave to warm it up because I want it to be kind of super pliable, if you will. You could always use maple syrup for this instead of honey. We're going to drizzle the honey, sprinkle a little bit of chili powder. And a little bit of, for the spice, cayenne pepper as well. So to your liking, right? And then my favorite thing to do is sweet potatoes that I just discovered a few years ago, and I'm mad that I haven't always done it. Do some crushed pecans. If you candy those things, you'll eat this like all the time, but you don't have to take that extra step. Just some crushed pecans or chopped, if you will, over the top. It just changes things. So yeah, sweet and spicy roasted sweet potatoes.
So can I tell you that for Christmas, I got a bottle of honey chili sauce, which is the exact same thing of what you said, just in a bottle, and I'd never heard of it before. I haven't tried it yet, so now I know because I have a bunch of sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
All right, so you know what? I want to make sure that we have time to go through the fertilizing.
Okay. And
then we'll come back. So what I do is I get a slow release fertilizer, use organic fertilizer, and the reason why, and I've discussed this 1,000 times on here, but I'm going to do it again. Organic fertilizer, like a granule organic fertilizer, has to start to decompose in the soil before it releases its nutrients. Okay, so it's not time released per se, but it is time released in the way nature works. So you can use like a Miracle-Gro or something like that, but that's a synthetic fertilizer and it's going to feed immediately, which will help can cause to burn your plants. So what I do, as soon as I get my first true leaves, I may put 1/4 of a teaspoon in all of my seed cells, and just organic. They even have a seed starter organic fertilizer. You can do that as well, and I'll just put like 1/4 teaspoon in that, and then a couple weeks later, like you'll start to see things grow. And then I was using Osmocote for a long time, and that's a little ball fertilizer. It's in a time release, but I'm pretty sure that the balls are plastic, and so yes, they break down, but they leave microplastics, and I didn't really want to continue that problem for our planet, so I'm moving away from that for this, and just going to use the same fertilizer that I use out in my garden. If you want to give it a quick boost, you can super dilute fish seaweed fertilizer, like a liquid fertilizer. I'll put like a teaspoon of that in a 2-liter bottle and do like, I think it's 104 seedlings with that. And I'll do that. So, and then that will just help keep it growing. So once you get that first dose in there and you really see them taking off, then you can put a little bit more in, but you don't need to put a whole lot in. And to go we did skip over watering as well, and we both bottom water, right? So, and that's where those trays come into. I just pour in and it soaks it up. So, issues, fungus gnats. Everybody has a question about fungus gnats. I don't give a shit about fungus gnats. You know, whatever. If it bothers me, what I do is I get a little dish. I'll take, like, you can go, I have one that I've had for years. You go to like Lowe's or Home Depot and get the little plastic dishes. They're like 4 inches diameter and, you know, maybe an inch or two deep. It's something like that. And I'll put dish detergent in there and set it on each single tray, not tray, but each shelf. And then they'll get into that and get stuck. But you just, if you see a lot of fungus gnats, just hold back your watering. You know, you don't want to keep things saturated. But at the end, you're going to be, when it's time to go outside, you're going to be watering a lot because they're going to be filled with roots.
Yeah. So rapid fire in response. I do not, generally these last 2 years, I've not fertilized my seedlings, not because I don't think that it's worthwhile. It's just the lazy part of me. Not wanting to start a routine and trying to get those seedlings out of the door without that. The fungus gnats drive me wild. It absolutely is tied to overwatering, you know. So on occasion I have that issue with my houseplants. And so a remedy for that, to meet you where you are when it comes to the bleach, like the quarter pint mason jars, I'll take one of those, put some vinegar, clear or apple cider, into it, and then fill it up right up to the brim, cover it with saran wrap, poke holes, like pin-sized holes in that saran wrap. I'm putting a rubber band around it to hold the saran wrap or cling wrap, and poke little bitty holes. And the same thing like you do, I'll put it on the shelves to collect those things when they occur. But, you know, be careful of leaving standing water, you know, in your seed starting trays. And then what was the last thing you mentioned?
Watering.
Oh, yeah. Same idea. Watering from the bottom.
Why do you water from the bottom?
Because I'm nervous that I may kind of overwater. So in my mind, it's going to suck up the water that it needs, and then I can pull it out, you know, dump the water. It's a little bit messy sometimes, but I can dump the water out and keep on moving, especially at the very beginning. I don't want to dislodge seeds as well. And it's just something that's kind of out of sight, out of mind for at least a couple hours for me.
Yeah, so I do it, number one, I don't do it in the beginning to dislodge seeds. And then number two, I do it because it's cleaner. And I usually make sure, like I'll put in, I have a 2-liter bottle that I keep. It's the same one. I've been using it for like 4 years now. And I'll fill it up, and then I'll fill 4 trays with that 2-liter bottle split between those 4 trays. And that usually does me a little good. I could probably cut back, but you know, whatever. And so talking about that, and then talking about fertilizing, there is one reason why we don't have to fertilize right away when I use my seed starting mix, and that's because it has compost in it.
Yep.
And so what the seed starting mix is, it's 3 parts peat moss, 1 part compost, and then a half a part, which I don't even know if that exists, but that's what it's perlite. So, and you can adjust that as you see fit. You know, you could put a little bit more compost in, a little bit more perlite. I think this time I put too much perlite in, but the perlite's for drainage, the compost is for feeding it, and then the peat moss is to hold moisture. So there is a little bit of nutrients in there, but there's not a lot.
Yeah.
So it's enough to get it going, because the seed, by design, by God himself, has enough nutrients in it to get that seed going. And then the compost is going to give a little bit more. And then we're going to add a little bit to it if you feel so fit to do so. And then that'll keep it going. And that's really the basis of it. Now, all of the stuff that I do, I buy big bags of it and I screen it all. So I get the big chunks out of it and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of work to it, but I posted something on Instagram, and I did a whole batch of it, and I believe it cost me $10, and that'll allow me to start 500 to 600 seedlings. So that'll be about spring into part of summer seedlings. Or it'll be my first batch of spring, summer, and then I'll creep into my second summer sowing with that. So that's really cheap.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure, if you go back to 2 bags of the seed starting mix in my neighborhood is $10, and that's not going to give you nearly as many seedlings as you're talking about. Final notes from me on that is one of the reasons why I tested out potting soil is like I should have to pot up because the potting up is, it's gotten too big for what it's growing in, but also you want to put it in a place that has some nutrients. So that was my logic for it. So price, potting soil is still cheaper than the amount of seed starting mix. And then the same reasons why I'm leaning towards your mix as my third kind of option is the price. And then I'm going to add some compost to that as well. Not my own. And I want to be able to kind of feed those seedlings. This is all in an attempt to not fertilize. I know. I didn't say it made sense.
So I don't use my own compost either.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I buy a bag of compost for ease. So I actually take that back. This time I did use my compost because I couldn't find the compost I wanted. Mm-hmm. But generally I go and I get, I'm not going to say your name. I'm sorry, company. You're going to have to call me. But I'm not going to, it's already screened and everything. Mm-hmm, and so basically when you dig in it, it's just nice fluffy dirt. Yeah. So you don't really have to do anything to it. Or I call it dirt, but compost. And so that just makes it easier. So I did it this year with my own compost because I do want to move into that direction because I want to do as much as I can coming from my garden. But when you're making a batch of it, 1 part compost, I believe that the time savings of me buying a bag of compost would have been worth the price of me going over there and getting a little bit and, all that stuff. So... and it's important that when you do it too, that you want it to be dry because if you're going to make this, you're going to store it and then you're going to keep it dry. And so what I'll do as well is I'll continue to give this recipe throughout this seed starting series at the end so that there's a chance for people to get it because I like it. It works well for me. And when I deviated from it, I had terrible results. So
okay,
there's that. But that's it. That's spring seeds. Can you believe it?
Oh, sorry. I had to reach over my lunch cheesecake for that.
She's living her best life, everybody.
Yeah, man. I can't stay up late enough to eat this stuff as dessert, so I'm just doing it midday.
So, everybody, I hope... Well, first of all, I hope that you enjoyed the fact that I used the S word. Spring. How many days until spring?
I don't know,
When's this episode coming out?
45 days or something. This is going to be February 3rd is when it airs. And when is spring? March 21st?
Yeah.
Oh, it seems so far.
It's not, though.
March 20th. Yeah. Okay. That's in your mind. My mind is processing this differently.
Yeah. Well, and if you start these seeds and we plant them like they're supposed to, your spring starts earlier.
Yeah, okay. That's a way to look at it.
Just saying. That's how I look at it. All right, everybody, stay safe. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I enjoyed talking to you guys. Check out our links below. Batavia, do you want to tell anybody anything?
See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please follow us on YouTube at Backyard Gardens TV.
Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV. Over on our website, backyardgardenstv.com. And then we have Patreon at Backyard Gardens.
And don't forget to check out our links below to help the show. Thank you so much for joining us as we learn to grow and grow for change. Cut.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.